It looks very good, doesn't it? That's right. 73 points. 73 points. While it may not be as significant of a record as 100 that Wilt Chamberlain put up nearly 60 years ago, 73 points is the number of the night as it represents the largest victory in NBA history produced by your Memphis Grizzlies. A 152-79 victory over the Oklahoma City Thunder. All the different perspectives from a historic night for the Memphis Grizzlies and why it's so important, not just about the victory tonight, but also how well the Grizzlies are playing right now. That and much more on this edition of the Locked On Grizzlies podcast. Here we go.
You are Locked On Grizzlies, your daily Memphis Grizzlies podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yeah, we're just going to hold it up one more time. See right there. 73 points. 73 points. Welcome to the Locked On Grizzlies podcast. My name's Shawn Coleman. Hope wherever you are, wherever you're listening, or wherever you're watching, you are having a fantastic start to your Friday. Of course, you can find me at StatsSAC, the show at Locked On Grizz. My name is Shawn Coleman. I'm a credentialed media member with the Grizzlies. Been covering the Grizzlies now for 4 years. Your host here at Locked On Grizzlies, your Grizzlies every day. You can find the podcast wherever it's available: Spotify, Stitcher, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, the Odyssey app, wherever you choose to listen. That's where we will be. And you can also find us here on YouTube. Hit that subscribe button below. Lets us know you enjoy the show. Lets others be able to find the show and just makes the show experience the best it can be for everyone in general. I want to also remind you that the title sponsor for today's show is Truebill. It's the new app that serves you money by helping you identify and stop paying for the subscriptions that you don't want or need, and it can even negotiate better deals for you that you want to keep. Check out Truebill today. So that is correct. The Memphis Grizzlies make history on Thursday evening, a 152-79 victory over the Oklahoma City Thunder. And there's so many different records and so much history that was made. It's just, I can't stop smiling. It's just a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun to watch. And obviously, for those who have listened to the show for a while, for those who follow me on Twitter, now you know that I love stats. I'm a big numbers guy. I love looking at things from the lens, from a statistical, analytical lens. And it was just, the nights like this are so much fun to look at sports through those lenses. But beyond the numbers, which is the overall experience of seeing how much fun it was, everyone was contributing on a great night. It was awesome to see all the players, and especially when you consider the fact that it was out our superstar in Ja Morant. And I know again that the competition we were facing with the Thunder, the roster we were facing, was arguably the worst in the NBA. That's nothing against the Thunder. It's just where they are right now in their rebuild without Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Josh Giddey, and others. I do get that this Thunder roster certainly was not among the best in the NBA, but still, the Grizzlies took care of business at a level we've never seen them before. And the thing about it is that it's just been continuing trends that we'll discuss a little bit later on in the show. But a 152-79 victory over the Thunder. And it started off right from the beginning. You know, the thing that stood out about this game is that the layers of the lead for the Grizzlies, they just kept surging more and more. 3 or 4 minutes into the game, the Grizzlies were up 10. Then another 2 or 3 minutes later, they were up 18. We get into the second quarter, they're up 20. Halftime, they're up 72-36. Third quarter, they're up by 40. By the end of the third, by the end of the I believe by the end of the third, they're up 50, 60, and then the second unit comes in. The Grizzlies brought in the basically their third string players. The Grizzlies emptied their bench in this game halfway through the third quarter. And it was those players who came in and then extended the lead even more. The Grizzlies had 8 players who were at a plus 20 or above last night. 5 of them were at a plus 39 or more last night, including Santi Aldama, who we'll get to in just a second. He had a plus 52, the third highest point total, individual plus-minus point total that a player's ever had in a game in NBA history. And we're talking about him doing this in, 25 minutes played? That's how amazing it was. Basically, for every minute that Santi Aldama was on the court last night, who came into the game having played less than 100 minutes all year, the Grizzlies basically extended their lead by 2 points every minute that Santi Aldama was in the game last night. That's how spectacular it was to see. And so the Grizzlies basically came into the game, and I talked about it yesterday. I talked about how the Grizzlies needed to avoid this being a trap game. Last year, the Thunder had really made things difficult for the Grizzlies. An unexpected loss by the Grizzlies to the Thunder because the Grizzlies could not stop the Thunder from shooting the three on the road last year. And then the Thunder without Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, a very similar setup to this game right here. The last time that the Grizzlies played the Thunder, when they were without their best players, the Thunder actually had a 4-point lead at halftime. Well, this time around, the Grizzlies had a 36-point lead at halftime. And of course, the starters all played, to the extent, not necessarily very well, but of course, Jaren Jackson Jr., 27 points, 6 threes, 2 steals, 2 blocks. I mentioned it on Twitter. He was the second player in NBA history to, on 11 or fewer field goal attempts, have 27 points, 6 threes, 2 steals, and 2 blocks. The reason why that specific statistical inquiry is so significant is because of how productive Jaren Jackson Jr. was in as few shot attempts as he had. He did that in 20 minutes of play. We want to talk about Jaren Jackson Jr. getting consistent, being consistently productive. Well, just look at it. This past Sunday against the Sacramento Kings, 17 points and 9 rebounds in 22 minutes of play? To last night, 27 points, 6 threes, 2 steals, 2 blocks in 23 minutes of play? You can't ask for much more production than that. And so he definitely lived up to his role. DeAnthony Melton was outstanding in the first half. I believe 3 threes, 17 points. He became the second Grizzlies player to have 17 or more points, 7 or more field goals, and 3 or more threes while shooting 100% from the field. The only other person that had done that was Anthony Peeler back in 1996. So you have an historically productive night from Jaren Jackson Jr. in your starting lineup, plus a historically productive night from DeAnthony Melton off your bench to go along with the contributions of everybody else. There was just no stopping the Grizzlies. Overall, the NBA record for most points, for the biggest margin of victory was 73 points. A new franchise record for the Grizzlies when it comes to points in a game, 152. The previous was 144. A new franchise record for the Grizzlies in terms of assists. A new franchise record in terms of the Grizzlies, 62.5% shooting on over 95 shots in a game. The Grizzlies came into last night's game leading the NBA in shot attempts per game, and they made 5 out of every 8 shots that they took last night and took a total of 95 shots. That's how spectacular it was. It wasn't like in this game, you want to talk about a full 48 minutes. The Grizzlies, from the start to finish, legitimately put together one of the most impressive offensive performances in NBA history, and it was a complete team victory. This wasn't someone going off for 50 or 60 points. This wasn't 2 teammates combining for 80 or 90 points together. The Grizzlies had 9 players in double digits. Again, 8 of players with a plus 20 or above. No matter what lineup combination the Grizzlies put out on the court, they dominated from the top, from Jaren Jackson Jr. all the way down to Jared Culver. That's how impressive this victory was. But the thing about it is this: as amazing and impressive as this victory was, at the end of the day, as Taylor Jenkins and the players alluded to, it's one victory. It's great for records to be set. Yes, there should be pride. It should be celebrated with how good the Grizzlies played. But the even bigger thing is the trend that we're seeing this team, the positive trends that we're seeing with this team without Ja Morant on the court. We'll discuss how the trends that we're seeing with this Grizzlies team that include this victory are just as important as the victory itself. We'll discuss that in just a moment. But again, I want to remind you that this show is sponsored by Truebill. The thing with Truebill is it's an awesome setup. We all love when we're online or doing different things on the internet. We all get, many things catch our eye that we want to try out on free subscriptions, whether, it's an article site or, it's, possibly it's watching funny videos, whatever it may be. We all love to subscribe to things for free trials. But did you know that they're a business scam? Don't let greedy corporations pocket your money. Download Truebill to take care of your subscriptions. It's the new app that helps you identify and stop paying for subscriptions. On average, people save up to $720 per year with Truebill. Because companies make subscriptions hard to cancel, Truebill makes it incredibly simple. Just link your accounts and Truebill will cancel your unwanted subscriptions in one tap. And the thing about it is that if you can go to Truebill.com/LockedOnNBA, go right now to Truebill.com/LockedOnNBA. It could save you thousands per year. Again, Truebill.com/LockedOnNBA. Of course, we want to thank you for making Locked On Grizzlies your first listen of the day. But make sure for your second listen, you check out the Locked On NBA podcast. You can absolutely bet your ass that the Grizzlies are going to be a part of Locked On NBA in today's show with how historic their victory was. But all the different stuff around the NBA, including LeBron James's availability for the Los Angeles Lakers and trying to get back on track in their season, coming up with the game against the Clippers, all that on the Locked On NBA podcast, free on podcast platforms wherever you listen to podcasts, and also here on YouTube as well. Also want to remind you that tomorrow we'll have a special Saturday episode. Daniel Greer of the Grizzlies Lead will be joining us. His 901 Grizz podcast. He'll be joining us, a friend of mine. We've had him on the show before. He'll be joining us to discuss the Grizzlies and previewing what is to come now that the schedule is going to be a bit tougher for the Grizzlies coming up. That and much more with Daniel Greer of the 901 Lead on Saturday's episode. But before we get into what's coming ahead for the Grizzlies, again, a big thing is, despite how special last night was and how spectacular it was and how memorable it will be for years to come, to me, the even bigger storyline is the fact that the Grizzlies have now played 3 straight games. And I believe that the stat said that they're only the third team over the past 25 years that have done this. Literally in the past 3 games, without Ja Morant, who has not played a minute, against the Kings, against the Raptors, or against the Thunder, the Grizzlies have legitimately played 3 straight games in which they have led from start to finish. The Grizzlies have not been behind at all over the past 3 games. We're talking about from the opening tip of that game against the Kings to when the buzzer sounded last night against the game against the Spurs. The Grizzlies have either been tied or they have not trailed, or they've been in the lead. They have not trailed at all in the past 3 games. And that is absolutely a wonderful thing to see. And yes, as impressive as the offense has been against the Kings and against the Thunder, the other big factor has been the defense. For the 3rd straight game, the Grizzlies held their opponents to under 40% shooting and held their opponents to 30% or worse shooting from 3. Again, I discussed it in the game against the Kings in the first half against the Raptors. The Grizzlies, on 140 total field goal attempts allowed and over 60 3-point attempts, they held the Kings and the Raptors to under 35% scoring, or 35% from the field, and under 25% from 3. That's how impressive it's been. And yes, going into last night's game, the Grizzlies were still 30th in the league when it came to defensive rating, but they had put together 2 very good games, their best stretch of defense back-to-back against the Kings and Raptors, and then come out last night and do the same thing. Another game where they had, many steals, many blocks. They forced more than 20 turnovers by the Thunder. The opportunistic part of the Grizzlies' defense is standing out, but they're finally getting the discipline to follow up with it as well. Nathan Chester over at Grizzly Bear Blues, he brought up a great point yesterday. He mentioned that the Grizzlies were first in the league in steals, or first in blocks in the league, and 3rd in steals forced, which is a great thing to see. Again, it's the opportunistic nature of this Grizzlies defense that is elite compared to the NBA. But as Coach Jenkins has mentioned before, it's pairing the opportunistic part of the defense with the disciplined part of the defense. Despite the fact that the Grizzlies were among the best in the league at forcing turnovers or forcing defensive stops through steals and blocks, they also were the worst team in the league in terms of defending the 3. But over the past 3 games, The Grizzlies are holding their opponents to under 30% shooting, and we're talking about a total of 100 threes. It's not like the teams are only shooting 15 threes per game. The Kings, Raptors, and Thunder have shot nearly 100 threes over the past 3 games, and the Grizzlies have held them to under 30% over those 3 games. So for a coach and a coaching staff that consistently, in a roster as well, that consistently talks about putting together a full 48 minutes of productivity, a full 48 minutes of success, this is probably one of the best stretches we've seen them doing that night in and night out since Taylor Jenkins took over as head coach. And again, I know that they're playing teams that they should be beating. But for a team in the Grizzlies who has now lost 6 games by 20 or more points so far this season, this is a big step forward, especially without Ja Morant. I'm not saying all of a sudden the Grizzlies are going to become a true threat to finish as a top 4 team in the West, though they're in position right now to be that. But what I am saying is that from the inconsistencies that we have seen from this team night in and night out so far this season, they finally put together a stretch that they can take pride in. Not that they need to rest on their laurels or anything like that, but that they can take pride in, and that they've been able to put together back-to-back games where they played a full 48 minutes. It's been due to good defense, and it's been without their best player. However, another great development is that without Ja Morant, there's no questioning who the Grizzlies' best player is right now. And of course, that's Jaren Jackson Jr. Let's go back to, about 10 days ago, 11 days ago, 11 days ago. The game actually, let's go back nearly 12 days ago. The game against the Minnesota Timberwolves, it was 2 weekends ago where the Grizzlies lost on the road by 43 points. They had their now well-known meeting, an hour and a half, players, coaches, whatever meeting, where they really talked, where they really got together and basically were saying we're tired of getting our butts kicked on the weekends, but in general, we're tired of getting our butts kicked by opponents. And then what happens? The Grizzlies come out and they play against the Utah Jazz, one of the best teams in the NBA, and Jaren Jackson Jr. is the best player in the second half, and it leads to a Grizzlies victory. But let's go game by game, and let's just discuss how much of a difference maker Jaren has been. In that game against the Jazz, Jaren was arguably the best player in the second half of that game. The Wednesday before Thanksgiving, he was clearly the best player on the court against the Raptors. Unfortunately, foul trouble kept him from being able to repeat it. Obviously, the game against Atlanta, that, was a pretty forgettable game. But the first half against the Kings, it was Jaren once again who was arguably the best player on the court. He didn't even have to play much of the second half, but 17 points and 9 rebounds in 22 minutes of action. And then this past Tuesday, he's the best player on the court again, 25 points, 5 blocks, 4 steals. And then last night, 27 points, 6 threes, multiple blocks, and multiple steals. You're talking about over the past 6 games, in terms of the 12 halves of basketball that has been played, Jaren has either been one of or the best players on the court between the Grizzlies and whatever team they're playing. In 8 of those 12 halves, Jaren Jackson Jr. has either been one of or clearly the best player on the court. So again, we want to talk about stretches of consistency. We want to see proof that Jaren Jackson Jr. can consistently play at a high level. It's happening right before your very eyes. Over the past 2 weeks, Jaren Jackson Jr. has been one of or has been the best player on the court in 8 of the 12 total halves over the past 6 games that the Grizzlies have played. And the numbers show it as well. Over the past 6 games, Jaren is averaging 20.8 points on 53.8% shooting from the field. He's making just under 3 threes a game at 44.7% shooting from 3. Is averaging over 4 free throws and making 88% of his free throw shots. 5.5 rebounds, only 1 assist, but only 1 turnover as well. He's only had 3 assists over the past 6 games, but only 6 turnovers, but also 2.3 blocks and 1 steal. He is being productive on both ends of the court, and on average, Jaren is a plus 10 each and every night. He's been above 60. He's been a plus 66 over the past 6 games. That's how special he's been. So that's the thing that stands out about just how impressive this is. Yes, last night was historic. It was incredible. It was amazing to see from the top of the roster to the bottom. But the bigger thing is that the Grizzlies are finding success. They're finding that consistency that we needed to see them find. And the reason why is because they're finally finding finally their groove again when it comes to their defense, and Jaren Jackson Jr. is stepping up and consistently, not just once or twice, but consistently is being the difference-making force we all know that he can be, and that is certainly incredible to see. But a couple of other fun things that stand out about this recent play of the Grizzlies are really putting them in a position, well, to take advantage of what is going to be a very important month of December. I'll explain that in just a moment. But before I do, I want to also discuss when it comes to you yourself. Listen, last night, the Grizzlies had so many different options that delivered and made their mark on the game. Well, if you're someone that likes to have a source that can provide you with many different options that can make your day better, it's Built Bar. The reason why is because there's over 18 different flavors to choose from. That's right. Go to Built.com right now and you can choose from over 18 different flavors when it comes to whatever type of taste you like with Built Bar. It's a protein bar that tastes like a candy bar. Tastes great. It's healthy for you. Have it in the morning as breakfast, in the afternoon as a snack, but it can also provide you the energy that you need to get through your day. You can go to Built.com, put in the promo code LOCKED15 and get 15% off your next order from Built Bar. Again, we want to thank you for making Locked On Grizzlies your first listen of the day. But why not check out Locked On Bets as your second listen? A show where it's your boy Q and Lee Sterling who have done a great job over the past several weeks giving great advice when it comes to betting. I would think to say they may start being a bit more favorable towards the Grizzlies when it comes to their locks of the day. But check out Locked On Bets as your second listen of the day, obviously after Locked On Grizzlies. So I talked about how obviously it was incredible performance last night. The consistency now that the Grizzlies have found, playing a full 48 minutes, this 3-game winning streak, night in and night out, not only finding different ways to win, but staying competitive. Though the Grizzlies had played a manageable part of their schedule, the fact that they've taken care of business to the extent that they have certainly is significant. But another thing that I'll say has been really, really fun to see, and we're seeing it pay off, is that the Grizzlies have also, they're starting to see payoffs in the balance that they've shown. And again, I feel that at times it is fair to have been critical of the fact that the Grizzlies may have at times this season put too much of an emphasis on wanting to balance out development with competitiveness. I'm meaning making sure that Zaire Williams has a nice 15 to 20 minute night role carved out in the rotation and things such as that. John Conchar as well at times. The Grizzlies probably have been too reliant on younger players who may have been in too big of roles for themselves that could have contributed in major ways to 1 or 2 losses this year. But again, the Grizzlies, to be honest, they just haven't really been that concerned about that. Their focus going into the season always was balancing being competitive while also developing young talent. But the key thing about it is this: they're starting to see that commitment to developing that young talent pay off for them. You saw it last night with how well the Grizzlies reserves played, but especially Santi Aldama. And I'll give credit to Taylor Jenkins and his staff. While it may be that it's fair to be critical of the fact that they may have been too focused on balancing out being competitive and development when it came to using certain players in rotation spots, they're staying consistent, though, at what they're looking to do. That's one thing that has defined this Grizzlies, era, this next generation under this new front office and under Taylor Jenkins. Yes, at some point you may have felt, I may have felt, others may have felt that the Grizzlies are too committed to focusing on the future. They're not taking full advantage of the opportunity that's there for them right now with how competitive they can be. While we may be critical of that, and at times it may be warranted, the Grizzlies have not strayed from the fact that that's what their focus has been. Their focus has always been developing young talent. We saw it in the game against the Jazz the other night. Well, against one of the best teams in the league, Taylor Jenkins with Zaire Williams over Kyle Anderson, when it clearly was probably better to go with Kyle Anderson Coach Jenkins went with Zaire Williams because it was an opportunity to get Zaire Williams into a competitive, closing, high leverage type situation to play with the Grizzlies' best players. And as soon as Zaire Williams steps out, we don't see Xavier Tillman or we don't see John Conchar step up and get big minutes early in the first half or in the first quarter. It's Santi Aldama, who's got 15 to 20 minutes over the past few games. And you're seeing it pay off. Santi Aldama last night, again, you have to consider the competition, but Santi Aldama last night was absolutely spectacular. 18 points, 10 rebounds. He showed that he has the capability of being that type of player, the type of player that can impact the game in many ways. I talked about Zaire Williams, earlier this week. About one thing about Zaire that's part of his development is that right now he's not like a John Conchar, or he's not like a DeAnthony Melton, where he can consistently contribute in so many different ways, like a Kyle Anderson, so many different ways outside of scoring. Well, Santi Aldama could do that. I know he had 18 points, but you're talking about a guy who was able to alter shots. You're talking about a guy who was making the right passes, talking about a guy who could find his stroke from three, but the rebound. Santi Aldama has a very, very good knack for rebounding, and it showed last night. So even with the Grizzlies getting consistent in terms of being able to play a full 48, their offense playing well and their defense playing well, their consistency in another way of staying consistent with wanting to get their young talents developed while also remaining competitive, it's paying off as well, because Zaire, before he got hurt, his injury should be a short-term thing. Zaire, before his injury, got hurt. He was improving in his play, and now, of course, we've seen Santi Aldama probably exceed expectations that many had for him in a role such as this. He really has played well, considering, his level of experience over the past two games. And another thing that I'll say is this, and it may not be that significant, but for me, I do think that it's important. Those 6 games earlier this year where the Grizzlies had lost by 20 or more points, and now, over the past few games where the Grizzlies have been up big themselves, and there was another couple of games where the Grizzlies were up big as well. In half the Grizzlies games so far this year, the fourth quarter has basically been garbage time, as they would call it. That's not anything to be negative. It's just that the Grizzlies lineups that they have played have involved their players that are not going to play on a regular basis. That could pay dividends as time goes on, because as the Grizzlies combine these games where the starters are not playing that many minutes, along with the extra rest that they are getting this year compared to last, that really could benefit them as time goes on. Again, you don't want to see these blowout losses, but the fact that the Grizzlies are able to keep the minutes numbers low for their starters or their main contributors, that could really pay off here in the near future. Because again, as special as it's been for this Grizzlies team to play at the level that they're playing, to set the new record for the biggest win in NBA history, and to play the level of offense and defense that they're playing right now, for Jaren to be playing as well as he's playing right now, I think one of the big reasons why the Grizzlies are finding their groove is because they're able to stay fresh. You've already got them being able to stay fresh because they're already one of the deepest teams in the NBA. But I think also a big key contributor to the Grizzlies being able to stay fresh, and this will continue to be the case as the season goes ahead, is the fact that there's been so many games so far where the Grizzlies' best players have only had to play 25 to 30 minutes a night. So a hidden benefit, while you don't want to go about doing it this way, but a hidden benefit of all those blowout losses and a few blowout wins so far this year is that the Grizzlies have had many games where their starters have not had to play extended minutes. But all of this comes to the simple fact that the Grizzlies right now are playing their best basketball of the season. When it comes to consistency, when it comes to defensive impact, when it comes to Jaren Jackson Jr. playing at the level that he is, Desmond Bane playing at the level he is, it's all come together for the Grizzlies to be playing their best basketball of the season, and it could not come at a better time, because now the focus is on a December schedule where the Grizzlies can really put themselves in a favorable position when it comes to the amount of the quality of opponents that they're going to be playing. I'm not saying that the Grizzlies are all of a sudden going to steamroll the month of December and be have an 11-4 record without Ja Morant. But if the Grizzlies can at the very least remain competitive and get some wins like they will over the next week when they face the Mavericks twice and the Heat as well. And then later on this month when they play the Trailblazers twice, the Lakers twice, a game against the Sixers, of course, right around Christmas, playing the Warriors and the Suns. If the Grizzlies can at least remain somewhat able to put significant stretches of play together where they're playing defense at this level as well as the offense playing well and Jaren and Desmond Bane and others playing at this level, they're going to get some victories. The opportunity is right there for them with 2 games over the next week against the Dallas Mavericks for the Grizzlies to really put themselves right on the Mavericks level when it comes to the top seed or the top spot in the Southwest Division. So that is what is, to me, the even bigger benefit of this recent play, despite the accolades and the pride and, just the overall joy of making history. It's the fact that the Grizzlies are making waves with their best play of the year. This consistency that I and others have been preaching all year long. The defensive improvements that I and others have been preaching all year long. Jaren stepping up to consistently be a difference maker that I and others have preached all year long. It's all happening right now. Can the Grizzlies maintain that level of consistency is going to be the big question going forward. And with how well they played over the past 5 days, I don't see how anyone would doubt that they could moving forward. Again, I'm not saying the Grizzlies are going to go through the next week in 2 games versus the Mavericks and a game versus the Heat, winning, these games by 15, 20, 25 points themselves. I'm not saying that at all. But I am saying that I do feel there is a lot more confidence in the potential of this Grizzlies roster without Ja Morant. There's a lot more confidence in what they can do now versus how things looked nearly a week ago. And a lot of that has to do with the areas of the Grizzlies that this fan base and this franchise have desperately wanted to catch up with what they've done in the past. The defense, Jaren's play, and the Grizzlies playing a full 48 minutes of basketball has finally caught up with it. Again, I'm not saying that this team right now is playing better than they were last year when they made the playoffs. I'm not saying that this team now is better than that team. But the best version of this Grizzlies team so far this year, we're watching right now. The fact that it is without Ja Morant doesn't mean anything negative towards Ja Morant. It simply means that if the Grizzlies can play like they are right now without him, just wait till he gets back and we'll be able to put his impact together with what we're seeing right now. It leads to a lot of potential excitement and could lead to a lot of potential good coming forward with the Grizzlies, especially with the fact that their schedule gets a bit easier as time goes on. Cam, thank you enough for joining us here on this edition of Locked On Grizzlies. So much positivity, so much fun. It's awesome being able to talk about the Grizzlies when they're playing this level of basketball, especially when it leads to a 73-point win, the largest in NBA history. Don't forget to check me out at StatsSAC on Twitter, the show at Locked On Grizz. Hit that subscribe button right there below here on YouTube. Hope wherever you are and wherever you're listening and watching, you have an outstanding Friday. We'll be back with you tomorrow with Daniel Greer of the Grizz Lead talking about the upcoming matchups with the Dallas Mavericks. That and much more coming up tomorrow and next week on the Locked On Grizzlies podcast. Until then, have a great day. Go Grizzlies. And don't forget the number of the day is 73. Have a great day.